Hi guys, here we are at Action 2018 at St. Clair College Center for the Arts, and we're about to start our next panel discussion. Jay, you are our MC. Tell us what is coming up next.
This panel is a fantastic panel. It's going to be how to work in comics. There's going to be tips, tricks, and strategies offered by some amazing Toronto creators. Meaghan Kearney, Meaghan Carter, Jason Liu, and Alison O'Toole. So this is a very, very beneficial panel for anybody interested in breaking into comic books and what you need to do. So it's going to be a very fun and informative panel.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi, guys.
Everyone. We're here. We did it.
Yay.
Happy Sunday. Yeah, we're really enjoying this nice natural sunlight in here. This is rare for us comics folks.
It's going to be an exciting panel, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, we're very happy to be here.
So
That's me doing a dap.
Very good, Jason. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Alison O'Toole. I am a freelance comics editor. I do some work for Chapter House Publishing, and I'm about to launch an anthology called Wayward Sisters. And I think I'll let my panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to be moderating, and they're going to be bestowing you with their wisdom.
My name is Jason Liu. I'm the writer and artist behind Toronto's own superhero, The Pitiful Human Lizard, that's published by Chapter House.
I'm Meaghan Carney. I am the manager of Comic Book Embassy, a Toronto-based studio. I'm a writer for Disney Princess, and I'm the creator of several web series.
My name is Meaghan Carter. I am a freelance comic artist. I'm also the author behind Godslave and Takeoff, which are both webcomic series. I'm also a freelance colorist and a teacher of cartooning for comics.
So I thought before we start talking about actually making comics, I know we have a lot of younger folks in the building today, that maybe we could talk a little bit about your schooling or anything you've done to kind of teach yourself or learn how to make comics and how to do storytelling and how to make art and that kind of thing. So maybe you could start by talking about that.
Yeah, so like I think the earliest time like I remember drawing comics was like when like I loved drawing when I was like 5 years old, and then I was like just drawing a series of them to the point where it was like I just want to tell a story with these drawings, and like I would just make these like mini booklets where like I just compiled all these drawings and like when I first learned how to use a stapler, and that was like my first form of making my own comic. And then reading a lot of like Marvel and DC comics when I was a kid, and eventually like learning the craft through high school and Sheridan College. And then did some internships with some comic pros.
Like who?
Like Chip Zdarsky, who's now doing stuff for Marvel, like Thing and the Marvel 2-in-1 with Thing and Human Torch right now.
And the Spectacular Spider-Man.
And Spectacular Spider-Man, yeah. He was one of my earliest mentors when I was in Sheridan College. And yeah.
I also drew comics from a very young age. I started out trying to copy Calvin and Hobbes strips. I am actually an alumni of the University of Windsor. I did the fine art, represent! I did the fine art program here, and I minored in English, where I took publishing practicum. I went on to attend Sheridan College for animation, and after graduating there, I took some night courses at Ty Templeton's comic book boot camp. And from there, I have been freelancing since then, and this year I will be doing more work with Disney, as well as a 3-book series with paper cuts.
I started off kind of like them, basically very young, just loving to draw, but also loving to tell stories and trying to find a way to marry those two loves. I went to Max the Mutt in Toronto, which is a private art college. I took 3 years of illustration. I graduated in 2010 and have basically started making a webcomic online on like a blog spot. And 7 or 8 years later, that comic has ended. I'm now on my new comic, which has been running for a couple of years, and working full-time in comics.
So I want to talk a little bit about the differences between working kind of on your own projects versus working on a publisher. We're working with publishers, so maybe you can talk about specific projects you're working on, difficulties you've faced on either, maybe a little bit about pitching, that kind of stuff, but maybe give us some idea of like the pros and cons of both options, and maybe some like practical advice for people who are looking to make a comic for themselves versus pitch something to a publisher.
So The Pitiful Human Lizard is like probably like my latest and most successful project I've ever done so far, and it started off as like a self-published comic book series set in Toronto that I used Kickstarter to help fund the production of the comic. And the great thing about the series is I'm writing and drawing in my own story and have like creative liberties to do whatever I want with it. And this was like my take of a new generation of a Canadian superhero that could fit in the history of Canadian superheroes that have already been established, like Captain Canuck and Northgard. And when Chapter House got established, which is the home of Captain Canuck, they picked up the series, and that's where the transition from having full control of my series to trying to play in another person's sandbox with other properties, which can be limited, but also fun at the same time, because you got to play ball with like the rules that are set with the other series. Like Captain Canuck, they have like certain like rules of like how people gain their powers, which can be limiting. Because I can't like tell a story that might contradict other lines in Chapter House.
There's an established universe.
Exactly. Yeah. It's still fun, but it's also like a learning experience. Yeah.
And how to tell stories within with rules around them that were established by someone else. Yeah.
Exactly.
When I started out, I challenged myself. I said, like, okay, if I want to do comics, I'm going to learn to do them by doing them. I'll put a comic online. And I started doing an adaptation of the original fairy tale of Beauty and the Beast, which was really fun, and I could do whatever I wanted with it. It's still serializing. You can buy the first 2 volumes in paperback here today. But I could do whatever I wanted with it because it was just me. Now I'm writing for Disney's version of that story. And I have a lot of rules I have to follow, and there's a lot of things I can't do. They actually give us like a big book. Alison also works with them, so she can attest to this. Like, okay, you can't, like, Snow White can't ever laugh at anyone. Like, okay, all right, I can't ever do that. Like, so-and-so always has to smile. So-and-so would never do this or that. And I have to follow those rules. And I can't mess with it because it's not my property anymore. It's something that belongs to a big company who's already made those decisions. So I think there's a lot to say for working in creator-owned and for having that control and for maintaining that copyright. But it's also a lot of fun to play in someone else's playground now and then, to get to use the toys that other people have made before you.
Yeah, I think you're going to find all of us are big proponents of self-publishing and creator-owned stories, even though all of us have had some brush with publishing. I think a lot of artists starting out think that publishing is the land of milk and honey, where they take care of everything and you just get the paycheck and all you have to do is draw the story. But there are a lot of rules, and publishing involves a lot of people, and it's a long process. So I started out just like Meaghan and Jason, writing and drawing my own stories, having full control of when things arrive, when things are printed, how the story goes. You don't have to answer to any middleman. And I still do that with Godslave and with Takeoff. I'm a complete in control of how that story goes. But working with publishers, I've worked with Chapter House doing some coloring, where I basically just send in colors and I don't really have to worry about anything, and then I have to wait for a paycheck. So that is nice, where there is that some element. Yeah, I think I am still a big fan of creator-owned and having full control over their property.
Mm-hmm. And I think when you're working with a publisher, even if it is something creator-owned, like regardless of who owns it, you're going to be going through a lot more hands, right?
Yeah.
Like you're going to have a lot more people who will have input, and even on things like scheduling and stuff like that. So it's definitely something to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And like maybe you think like, well, they'll handle the distribution, or they'll handle the printing costs. And it's like, true, yes, they are going to handle that, but it's going to take a super long time, and maybe there are delays, or maybe someone got fired and you've got to talk to a new person now.
Yeah, there can be a lot of other factors. So
happens
you've
a
all
lot.
talked a little bit about self-publishing, and I was hoping you could talk a little bit about what was involved in that process, because I think that if someone out here is thinking about making and publishing their own first comic, even if it's just a small zine or something, what's maybe 1 or 2 pieces of advice you would give to someone who's trying to make their own comic for the first time?
Never lower than 300 DPI.
Yes.
Yeah.
Saving quality.
Yes. 600 if you can get it.
Like if you want to write and draw your own story, start small with like a 6 to 8 page comic short.
Yes.
Because that's manageable, and you can probably do that within a month. And once you do that, you can give yourself a pat on the back and go, you know what, I'm ready to make another comic, and it's going to be better than that. And maybe even longer, maybe 12 pages. Then you'll work your way up to like being conditioned to drawing a 24-page regular comic.
Jason is smart.
Where were you 8 years ago?
Yeah, my first comic is over 600 pages right now.
Yeah, mine was around 300, and then I was like, I'm sick of this.
Yeah, 8 pages is a really good idea. Do 8. Don't do 600.
Yeah, don't start with your magnum opus where it's like, I have this amazing idea and it's going to be perfect, and there's a huge world building, and it's like a big intergalactic war, and I have like all these different cultures, and it's like, just save it.
No.
But the difference is you guys were able to commit to that. Like, you guys were able to like reach to that level where like most people can be very ambitious to the point where like, I got this,
They're
800 page,
too
and you'll be like, I
ambitious.
can only do 20 pages. I'm going to give up and do something else.
Yeah.
For sure, like we overcame that, but also you have this big baby that becomes your learning baby.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Your baby can be ugly sometimes.
yeah.
Yeah, and by the time you get to page 800, you look back at page 10 and go, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
your art style can change, especially as an artist. It can change so much in such a short period of time. Like, you look at a lot of people doing things like Meaghan and Megan have done, where they publish things online, and you can see their art changing over the course of just a few months.
Yeah.
Where the learning is public.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
My motto, and what should be your motto if you want to make comics, is done is better than perfect.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it is worth more to you and worth more to the world to see that you can finish something than to see that you can do a perfect thing that you never finish. So done
Yep.
is better than perfect.
Yeah.
As an editor, I will confirm that as well.
And just, look at your next project as the one that you're going to do even better than the last one.
Yep.
Because you're always just going to keep improving, and it's always going to be a challenge for each project.
On each project I take on, we've all been doing a lot of short work for anthology books, like Wayward Sisters or like Gothic Tales of Haunted Love. For myself, I've been saying with each short comic I do, I pick one thing to get better at. So with my last comic, I said, all right, I'm going to get better at drawing old people. So although I drew the rest of the comic, my focus was just making all the old people's faces look really good, so that when I'm done, I'll have that skill that I didn't have before.
And anthologies, now that you mention them, are a really great way to get started as well, because there's a
Yeah.
chance you'll be working, when you're working with an editor, it means that you can have like collaboration. It's someone else looking at your work, and someone else who will publish your work, which is great for resume and that kind of thing. So if you don't maybe want to go through the figuring out how to put a comic together in InDesign and find a printer for it and all that stuff, anthologies are a really great venue for that, for sure.
And like drawing and writing is not like for everyone. Like there are people that just love to write, and there are people that just love to just do art. So like anthologies is a great way to be paired up with someone that can be your better half in
Yep.
a creative project.
Yep, definitely.
Definitely.
And we've been talking a little bit about also working online, which is a little different than working in print.
Yes.
So I was hoping we could talk about both webcomics, but also the Kickstarter process, what that's been like.
Okay, so with webcomics, so like I said, I started off posting a comic on my blogspot in 2010.
What does that look like? For someone who's never read a webcomic before, what does that look like?
Basically, that means I post a page of the comic on the website once or twice a week. So you're reading it as I post it. It's not, usually it's not all up there to read at once. So you're getting the updates as they go on. When you get to a comic, though, usually there's a whole archive you can go through. Usually there's a page for, like, you can read about the characters. What is this comic about? Usually there's a store. And a lot of the time, webcomic means that it's an independent person. So you're supporting an independent author. But
Please come to our booths and support these independent authors.
So with webcomics, a lot of times it'll mean eventually moving to print and having a physical copy of the book. So webcomics, the business model is that you give it away for free. You give the content away for free, and you make the money either through advertising on the website or through merchandise, so selling books, lapel pins, t-shirts, and that's basically how that system works.
And you got picked up by
Hiveworks,
didn't you?
Yeah, Hiveworks is it's like a webcomics management collective. It's basically the closest to like a webcomics publisher, where they handle the hosting for you, they handle the advertising for you, depending on your contract. They'll also handle running the store for you, and oftentimes making the merch. And they'll also, they'll buy out a big booth at a convention and sell several different works that they are publishing, just like a print brick and mortar publisher. But neither me or Megan have worked with a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Well, actually, before we get to Kickstarter, I wanted to ask a little bit too about scheduling, because what does a webcomic schedule in your week look like versus doing something? So again, you've both worked with publishers and with your webcomics, so how do you have to like manage your time differently for those two?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I do a webcomic. I also work with publishers as a writer and as an artist, and I have a 1-year-old. So my life is very,
How
very
are you
tight.
alive?
Yeah, I don't sleep ever anymore. No, my schedule is very precise now, and my attention span is exactly as long as nap time. So what I do is I try and focus on one thing each day of the week. So like, okay, on Monday I need to get this week's webcomics drawn. So I'll get 2 pages done Monday. Then on Tuesday I might be working on emails and scripts. Wednesday, like I go to playgroup Wednesday. On Thursday, I might be working on thumbnails for a graphic novel. So I just try and make sure I'm giving each project some time every week so they all continue progressing. But it is schedule hell.
Yeah. For like, if I pick up a freelance project where I have to get like I just finished a 22-page project for a writer, and I had to get that done inside of like 2 months. So pencils, inks, colors in 2 months. Whereas webcomic, it's for like me, for Godslave, it updates twice a week. So I just have to worry about those 2 pages that week. So that's kind of the difference between those schedules for me.
Well, so like independent comics like is not a lucrative career, but you really have to love to do it to make that happen. That's why I have like a regular day job, like a 9-to-5 day job, and I outside of that 9-to-5 shift, when I get home, I make dinner, and then I would spend like 5 hours each day on my comics.
Jason is a machine.
Do you want to know what Jason said to me with his human mouth? 1 hour for penciling, 1 hour for inking, 1 hour for coloring.
What the actual F, Jason?
No one else can work like that.
You gotta, yeah. It's like a workout routine. Like people go to a gym like to run as fast as they can.
That's
I
like
do that
manga
with
level.
Drawing.
Jeez.
And it's very disciplined to the point where like I would reward myself with a chocolate bar if I finish a complete comic. Yeah, like a chocolate bar that you can get for like $2 at a vending machine. It's like, I'm gonna finish you in a week when I finish my comics. If you follow my Instagram, you can see like how I timed my production. Like it can take me like about like less than a week to complete the inking stage of 24 pages.
Yeah. Can you imagine that?
That's atypical.
I'm going to tell you right now, for those not familiar, that's not the standard.
Yeah.
That's not normal.
No, that's
But I've been doing it for
anecdotal.
over a decade. Like, you have to work up that level.
So how long have you possessed this human body?
I think I've reached that enlightenment like in the past 4 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's talk about Kickstarter, Jason, because you run a Kickstarter.
So I ran a Kickstarter for Pitiful Human Lizard. I wanted to make sure that most of the production of the comic was 75% complete. So it was all the 52 pages of the first issue was inked, and all I had to do was color it. And when I ran a campaign for Kickstarter, I had a pretty good hook that attracted some media attention because it's about a Toronto-based superhero, and we've never seen this before, a superhero set in Toronto. But also a Canadian superhero that's very offbeat compared to other Canadian superheroes, that does not wear the maple leaf, that's not named after like a stereotypical animal like the beaver or
Maple
moose.
Man.
Maple Man, no.
His powers aren't snow-based.
But what makes him Canadian is his attitude and his mannerism. Like, yeah, he would apologize to his villains because he means well. He just wants to like do good for the city of Toronto. It's
very self-deprecating too, like a Canadian.
Unlike our politicians.
yeah, has a lot of heart. So that's how it attracted like some media attention. And yeah, Kickstarter is a good way to like campaign and advertise your comic within the 30 days, while attracting fans to pre-order your comic. So when it's ready, they'll get their comic once it's ready. And the one thing you don't want to do is let them down by delaying your production. So you want to make sure that you're reliable and very dependable, and have a solid product that your fans will be happy with, that they would want to come back for a second issue.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you have your project at least partially done if you're doing it by yourself, because yeah, like there's no better way to kill momentum than to be seriously delayed on a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Don't promise what you can't deliver.
Yeah. Have an idea of what you can deliver, and also be prepared to like lose your social life for a month if you're going to run a Kickstarter, because it is so much work, so much work. And Jason kind of talked about advertising, so that's something that's organic, but it's not. Like getting anyone to cover your Kickstarter is a lot of work, and you have to like have a list of the outlets you want to cover it, and be sure you email every single one of them and say, here's why your outlet would be interested in covering my Kickstarter. So you have to be prepared to like do that, do the interviews, do the work to make sure that people hear about your Kickstarter, because it's a long road and it can be incredibly worth it. With Wayward Sisters, we almost doubled our ask, which was incredible, but now we have to get 2,000 books and figure out where to put those and how to get them to people who bought the books from all over the world and this kind of stuff. And these are like practical concerns that you have to be prepared for.
Got to be very active on social media, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also like be original with each post, because you don't want it to feel like spam to all your fans every day. So like when I was doing the comic, I was coloring at the same time as a campaign. So here and there I would sprinkle like, here's a finished colored page of the comic that you're going to be buying.
Yeah.
That would entice the fans and also like reassure them that they've made the right decision, that they've backed my project.
Yeah, and being able to show a preview obviously also really helps with interest.
So we're talking a lot about social media and marketing and update schedules, which are things you want to worry about when you have a comic already.
Yeah.
So I think, and maybe we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit. Maybe we want to talk a little bit
Move
about
back and talk about
like don't promise any of this until you already have your product.
Yeah.
I think.
But yeah, you want them, but being active on social media is depressingly necessary when you do have a comic and when you're working on a comic, because that's just the easiest way in this day and age to get people's attention on it, right?
Yeah, especially with like ad block becoming more popular, where it used to be that you just sign up for Project Wonderful,
Put a banner
threw a banner up, and you could bid on ads. But now that's not viable. So yeah, social media, having that kind of presence, putting yourself out there is more important than ever.
Okay, so let's end by, I've done this before to you guys, but it'll be harder because it's not Toronto-based. But give me one recommendation for a resource that's something that's really helped you that you think could potentially help people. So whether it's a book or, I remember, Megan, you talked about like the library before and stuff like that, and the ROM, but stuff like that. Like, what's a resource? Where's somewhere that people can go that's like really practical to help them with their comics work?
Well, for me, so I did a comic about Egyptian mythology, which required a lot of research. So the ROM has a library inside of it. That's the Royal Ontario Museum. It has a library that's, it's called the Far Eastern Library. It has a whole room dedicated to Egypt, Egyptology, and mythology. And it was like priceless in terms of like help and research for that project. So if you're looking for that, I would highly recommend it.
I think the library in general, though, like I think that we're so used to getting information online now that that's our default, but like libraries still exist, support them. They can be super, like you can get books about making comics out from the library. So it's definitely something to check out.
I was going to suggest Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics and its sequel, Making Comics. I will fight you. Those are two great books that really deconstruct exactly how visual narratives work. And that's always a valuable thing to have as a creator, an understanding of all of the gears that are going underneath the surface. I'd highly recommend those, and you can get them easily here. And I also know that the library at the University of Windsor has a lovely graphic novel section.
Yeah, I was gonna second Understanding Comics as well, because like that was kind of my gateway to like refine my skills as a storyteller in comic book mediums when I was in high school. But also like take a comic that you appreciate, like you love the art and the writing, and if that's something that you want to aspire to, like study that and see why everything works in that comic, and then see where you're at, because sometimes like you know, like if you want to aim high and go like I want to like work for Marvel and DC, like you want to see like why some artists work in that level, or like if you're writing in your own comfortable voice, you still got to learn how to execute you know, telling a story through panels. And Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud is a great way to tell you how to tell a story in your own voice.
I will recommend, if you want to know about the indie publishing community, Spike Trotman's Twitter account at Iron Spike, and Dirty Old Ladies, the
her podcast. Yeah, I would also suggest that.
Yeah, if you want to learn about like indie comics and the community there, and like what other people are doing, what's working, what's not, those are really good resources. So, where can everyone find you on the internet? Everyone?
You can find Godslave at godslavecomic.com. You can find me on Twitter at Meaghan Carter, Mega_Carter. And you can find my booth at booth 70 right down the road, where it has my big old name on it.
You can find me online at thequietly.com. My webcomic is at batb.thecomicseries.com, and I'm on Twitter as @SpookyMeggy. You can find my booth right across the aisle from Meaghan Carter's, straight bound.
You can look for the Pitiful Human Lizard,
the local KFC,
or under Facebook. There's a Facebook page for Pitiful Human Lizard. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at rebel_Lou, and my booth is just behind Meaghan Carter's.
You're the landmark.
And you can find me on Twitter at Alison O'Toole. Or Wayward Sisters, my new anthology, at WS Anthology on Twitter and Instagram. And I am sitting just down the aisle as well, right behind Meaghan Kearney. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah.
You at the very far back, the one that's near the blue tent over there. I thought you raised your hand.
No.
No? Okay.
Is the Wookiee? No.